as law enforcement officers, we don't want to be pitted against the community. We are the community.
Did your administrators, chief, commissioner, whoever, did they have your back, or did they fall in line with this trend where we see administrators just kind of throwing their officers under the bus? Did that happen to you?
Oh, 100%. At that level, the police chiefs are nothing but politicians as well.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of the Officer Nate podcast. I have a special guest with me here today. He goes by the name of Sgt John Mattingly. Some of you probably recognize that name. We're going to talk about a very high-profile incident that he was involved in. John, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Appreciate you having me, Nate.
Yeah. So first, let's talk about your book, 12 Seconds in the Dark. It's available on Amazon, hardcover, and on Kindle, I believe. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's available anywhere. Basically, you can buy books. It'll be in Barnes & Noble on the shelves also when it comes out.
Nice. And when's the release date?
It's March 15th, so it's right around the corner.
Sweet. All right.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming people can pre-order it, yeah?
Yeah. Okay. It's up for pre-order now. Ready to go.
Is there another place that they can pre-order besides Amazon?
Yeah, if they just Google it, it pops up a bunch of different spots where they can go to.
Okay. And I'll post some of those links in the show notes too, so that people can just, have a quick link to go to if they want to order it. And they should order it, because we're gonna, I don't want to give away the entire contents of the book, but I would like to touch on the Breonna-Taylor case, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Because I think, there's a synopsis of your book that kind of explains that the Breonna-Taylor incident was not reported accurately by the media at all, or by BLM. So it's important for people who want the truth and want an accurate depiction of what happened to buy your book, listen to the podcast today, go get the book, so that you can be informed from someone who had a front row seat, you. So yeah, let's give us just like a brief, give us like a synopsis of the book. I know it revolves around the Breonna-Taylor case, but what else can people expect to find in your book?
The first few chapters are kind of a background of my life, why I wanted to get into law enforcement, my first few years on the job leading up until the incident that night, and then it covers the incident in detail, and then probably almost half the book is talking about things that happened afterwards, all the fallout from the city leaders refusing to put out the correct information, allowing the narrative to be spun so out of control that it couldn't be reeled back in. And once we started relaying the truth out, then then people started saying, "Oh, it's a cover up. Oh, you had a year and a half to, come up with this stuff." I'm like, no, the stuff was there from day one. Just people refused to put it out for whatever narrative was going on, the elections, the political pressure, whatever was going on behind the scenes that we don't quite have all the privy to. We know some of it, but we don't have all of it. And so it does that. And then at the very end, it's just talking about what we need to do to bridge the gap, to bring everybody together. Because, as law enforcement officers, we don't want to be pitted against the community. We are the community.
Yeah.
And so, this narrative that gets pushed then creates this divide and causes a horrible cycle to go around. And what we really want is just peace. That's the whole reason we're there. We're peacekeepers.
Yeah.
We're not there to start wars. We're there to resolve them. And that's a big touching point on the book too, that I would like for us as Americans to get back to.
Yeah. That's interesting, because at the very end of my book, the last couple of chapters are about that very same thing, about how to bridge that disconnect between the public and police. And it's funny that I'm sure Tatum probably covers that in his book too, but it's funny that, you and I never met before. When was it? Last week, 2 weeks ago, when we were
2 weeks ago
on Tatum's show. And it is interesting how we've got these books out there, and we both thought that it was important enough to include something about, not further alienating the public from the police and bridging that gap. So I think you've got a lot of police officers who, if they could, if they could write a book or do a podcast or whatever, would include that very same thing. And I think that would be pretty much across the board.
Yeah, that's our driving factor in life, right? As police officers, it's what we want, it's what we strive for. And so for that to be discounted at a level that makes us less than human,
Hmm.
it's pretty discouraging. And I feel bad for the guys that are still out there.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had enough time I could retire after this incident, but the guys that are out there need our support more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah. They definitely do. Cops have they've had they've just been beat down and berated and demeaned and just demonized for, like, I mean, for a long time now, but the last couple of years have just been horrendous. Especially
Yeah,
2020 was bad.
it was bad. 15 was bad, and then we kind of rebounded from it. 16, 17 started coming back to
Hmm.
level,
Yeah.
and then 2020 just went off the rails again.
Yeah. So, where'd you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I'm from Louisville. I grew up in Louisville in the poor end of town called Portland, and I went to school down there my
Hmm.
entire life. My first 3 years on the police department, I lived in that area,
Okay.
and then finally got had enough money to move out because it's everybody's goal is to keep moving up in life, and I
Yeah.
was able to move out of the really poor end of town and just to the middle class area, and I love Louisville and I enjoyed serving the people of Louisville.
Yeah. And you're not there anymore?
No,
No.
no.
Was
Once
it because of
once all
the
this kicked, yeah, the threats.
Yeah.
Once this all kicked off, we had hits taken out on our lives, and everybody that was involved had to move. It was a sad state of events because when that happened, the police department had no answers for us because they hadn't been through something this big before, and their answer was, "Well, let's put you in a motel downtown, right in the middle of the riots, for a couple weeks and see if things calm down." We were all like, no, we're not going to do that."
Yeah.
And so we just moved.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of administration, when we were on Tatum's show, we touched on this a little bit about how we manage the public's perception after a critical incident like that. Did your administrators, chief, commissioner, whoever, did they have your back, or did they fall in line with this trend where we see administrators just kind of throwing their officers under the bus? Did that happen to you, or?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So what people need to realize on police departments that's different than sheriffs, like sheriffs are elected officials, so they answer to the people.
Mhm.
And I think it's a good idea going forward if we could somehow concentrate on going to more sheriffs being the policing authority. That way, if the public doesn't like the direction it's going in 4 years, you get a new one or you get a recall and get them out of there if they're
Yeah.
destroying your city. But the problem now is police chiefs answer to mayors, and
Mhm.
if you're in a city that's got liberal policies and a liberal mayor, that's who's running your police department. Police
Yeah.
chiefs don't run departments for the
Right.
majority. There's some that do, but the majority of police chiefs don't do it. They're appointed, and they know if they don't toe the line of the mayor's agenda, they're out of there.
Yeah.
And they're all at that level. The police chiefs are nothing but politicians as well. And there's
Yeah.
some good ones out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not bashing police chiefs. I'm just saying the position they're in is an appointed position. And if they buck the line, they find a new person that'll do what they say.
Yep. No, I totally agree. I started to see that, when I was with the Twin Falls Police Department. They brought over a chief from a different agency who was on his way out the door. He was about to be fired from his current chief job, and our administration, our city officials decided to bring him over, hire him, pay him an ungodly salary, but basically just use him as the puppet.
That's it.
Because, like you said, police chiefs don't run the show. It's the mayors, the city managers, the city
Mhm.
council.
Right.
So no, I 100% agree, and I think that's a great idea. I always look to Sheriff Lamb. I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Yeah.
the American
I've met
sheriff.
him. Yeah.
Such a solid guy,
Right.
and I love the way he leads. I love the way he's not afraid to speak out, and as far as I can tell, um, he will have your back as long as you don't do anything to disparage the badge and bring the department into disrepute. If you're doing your job and you're upholding your oath, then he'll have your back. And I think you're right. We need more sheriffs in charge of more police agencies.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what you see the difference in what he does and what a lot of chiefs do, or a lot of leaders, even some sheriffs,
Hmm.
is, and it's what needs to be done. When there's something that one of their deputies or officers do, they call it out,
Hmm.
and they don't try to cover it up. Louisville unfortunately had a big incident a few years back with our Explorer program with um, they were molesting some of the kids there. Some of the
Mm.
officers were. Now they're in prison now, thank God. They should be
Mhm.
under it, but the chief and the mayor knew about that ahead of time. They found out earlier than anybody else, and it was a whole cover-up scheme for years. And finally, when that came to light, we had no trust in the community. It was gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you know about, of all things, the most reputable thing you can do is molest a
Mhm.
child? They
Yeah.
were doing it, and they were covering it up. And so, where's the accountability ability there? None. But who took the fall for that? Who had to take the brunt of all that distrust? It was the officers on the street.
Yeah.
So if we can get out there and say, "Hey, guys, we screwed up. This case was bad, or this shooting was bad, and this guy's gone. He's fired. He's locked up."
Mhm.
Then when it's time on situations like mine, where things are getting so blown out of line and out of proportion, they can come in and have some credibility to say, "No, this is the truth. This is what really went on. This is what took place," and they'd have a lot more respect from the public.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Did you see okay, so there's this trend, again, we're all about trends in America apparently, especially if they're woke. But, you've got like the Kyle Rittenhouse case, for example, and I don't know if you're familiar with Officer Dagus in San Diego
Mhm.
County. Yeah, where these DAs are prosecuting
Yeah.
people who are defending themselves. In Officer Dagus's case, he was doing his job, but they essentially fabricated charges so that they could
Right.
they could take him to court and quell the outrage of the BLM mob. Did you get any of that in Louisville? Was there any talk of DAs wanting to go after you guys?
The mayor really wanted to go after us.
Mm.
He said behind the scenes and even publicly at times, if he could fire us, he would, and he wanted justice for Brianna. And the situation with Brianna was sad. Nobody wanted her to
Sure.
die. It was tragic. But her boyfriend put her in that situation, nobody else.
Hmm.
And instead of the accountability going to the criminal, once again, it's pushed off on the officer that says, "Man, we've got to do something. We got to get rid of these guys. We got to fire them. We got to, the mob's yelling. What are we going to do?"
Hmm.
And unlike Dagus, we didn't get charged because our district attorney passed it off to the attorney general. And the
Okay.
attorney general happens to be a man of character and morals. And he took the case for what it was, for the letter of the law, and he outlined it and presented it. And the only charges that were filed were against Brett Hankinson for wanton endangerment. And he's the one that scooted around to the front of the building when he thought we were getting slaughtered at the door. All he heard was gunfire and the echoes from the brick and the metal. He thought we were getting slaughtered at the door, so he shot through some windows where he knew the shooter was at, or
Hmm.
where he last saw him, and just to try to get him to quit shooting us.
Yeah.
And so he's on trial. It started today, actually,
Wow.
for him. So we'll see what happens there in the next couple of weeks.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Um, well, I mean, thank God you've got a DA with some scruples
yeah,
over there. I mean, it's or an attorney general rather.
yeah. That's it.
Seems to be they seem to be few and far between. I mean, I say that, but I think it's just because these DAs who are going more and more progressively to the left and being more and more woke and acquiescing to the cries of a mob. They're very high profile. They're taking
Mhm,
some of these very high profile cases, so we hear about those all of the time.
mhm.
But it's nice to know that not all of them are that way.
Yeah, the amazing thing is our attorney general is a black guy. And
Okay.
this instantly went, since I'm white and Brianna was black, it instantly went to black and white.
Hmm.
Forget all the criminal activity. That stuff doesn't matter.
Right.
It just matters on skin color, period. So, man, he got called Uncle Tom and traitor and all these different horrible names and still does to this day. And, for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And most people just can't handle that pressure. But fortunately for us, he was the man in the right spot at the right time.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
When this Breonna Taylor case was still sort of on the front burner, and it was kind of it was one of the hallmark incidents for the BLM movement. You've got Trayvon Martin, you've got Michael Brown, and you've got Breonna Taylor, and then of course George Floyd. But George Floyd
Mhm.
is kind of an outlier. His incident was a lot different than the others, but and so I started looking into the Breonna Taylor case, and because people are saying they had the wrong house, and they shot her while she was asleep, and I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. This is the problem with most people, especially people who have never been police officers, is they don't look any further into an incident beyond what they hear and see in the media. But of course, I'm like, okay, they can't have had the wrong house. I know what goes into applying for a search warrant and all the work that goes into that. So I looked it up, and there happened to have been, like, the search warrant documents actually were online, and it had Breonna Taylor, it had her name on it, and I believe it wasn't it her residence?
Yes.
Yeah.
Her
So her
name, her
residence,
residence, her car.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
so there all of these indicators and, evidence to show that Breonna Taylor herself was probably involved in criminal activity, and I'm looking at these in these and I did a video on it in my original TikTok account, which has since been banned. But I'm like, guys, all you have to do is a quick Google search, even on
Yeah.
Google. You have the answers right in front of you.
But
But
that's the problem. People gotta want the truth. They don't. They
no,
love the sensationalism of it. They love any other reason to pile on, and that's both ways. We've become so childish in this nation. It's unbelievable. The 20% on each side. Most of us are in the middle here somewhere that are going, "Where's the normalcy? What happened to this world?" And then you got the
yeah,
crazies on each side just launching nukes at each other, and we're getting caught in the frag in the middle.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. But it's amazing though how there's no accountability for the people and especially the elected officials who,
Yeah.
will call for more violence when something like this happens, despite all of the evidence of a justified shooting, or any justified use of force. You've got elected officials who are trying to, throw fuel on the fire of especially racial tension, but especially when there's a narrative where police are corrupt and they're using excessive force and they're trying to get away with it. Like there's police officers who have ever gotten away with excessive use of force, at least in the last 30 years. You know what I mean? I know policing used to be a lot different a long time ago, but today,
According to that,
with the amount of scrutiny that police officers are under, I mean, with body cameras, with the micromanaging of supervisors and administrators, and just that ever watching eye of the general public and the media, how are police officers getting away with anything? Like, show me where a cop has gotten away with
well,
with
and we
shooting, getting into a shooting or any use of force for that matter, and just walked away from it and washed his hands and went back to work the next day.
Because even when you're innocent now, even when there's proof, like the poor guy up in I think it was Ohio where the girl was going to kill the other girl with a knife, and
Hmm.
he intervened and saved her.
Yeah.
That's on camera. Any other time, normal, logical, sane people look at that and go, "Ooh, he saved that girl."
Hmm.
But instead, it was flipped to, "Oh, he killed that girl,
Yeah.
the other girl." Forget the girl he saved. Forget the girl that was committing the crime. They
Hmm.
went straight for the juggler of, well, let's find an angle where we can make this look bad. So videos proved them wrong. Like we talked about last time, I think the stats are like 95% of the time where complaints come in when there's body cams. When it gets reviewed, people go, no, that's not your version. You may have thought that, but that wasn't that's not what took place here.
Right. Yeah. Well, and yeah, body, like, people think police officers hate the body cameras. No, they've saved more careers than they've ended.
I
Um,
so wish we'd have had one that night. Oh, it
yeah,
made all the difference in the world.
yeah. And, I so several years ago when I was still working patrol for the Twin Falls Police Department, we didn't have body cameras back then, but we had audio recorders that we were required to activate during any contact. And I had stopped this 19-year-old kid for, some traffic violation, no big deal. But when I looked at his ID and discovered he was 19, I also saw that he had like a 12 pack of Coors Light or something in the passenger seat. So I started asking him about it, and he was kind of being evasive. Well, my backup showed up, and I told my backup, I'm like, this guy's 19, but he's got beer in the passenger seat. So he opens up the passenger door to go ahead and grab the beer and set it up on top of the car because at the very least, this kid was gonna, he was gonna catch a charge for minor in possession. But as soon as my backup opened the door, this kid flips out and just, starts calling us all kinds of racial. He was Hispanic, starts calling us all kinds of racial slurs. We ended up having a fight with him and, put him on the ground and put him in cuffs. And um, when we took him to jail, we eventually charged him also with, resisting and obstructing. But he gets bailed out by his dad, and he tells his dad that the cops that arrested him called him racial slurs, threw him to the ground, beat him up, threw cuffs on him, kicked him while he was down, all this stuff. Well, his dad comes in to file a complaint that night, and he's talking with my staff sergeant, and they bring him into the sergeant's office, and the way the sergeants told me the story is this dad comes in and he's just all puffed up, he's ready to have someone's ass and someone's badge. And when he told them what the complaint was, they're like, we just want to play you the audio recording from the traffic stop. So they play him the audio recording, And then he goes from this to this, just hanging his head because his kid's a piece of shit, just being a complete douche with the
Yeah.
cops. And
I'm feeling the kid
so
got another butt kicking when he got home.
I certainly hope so. I don't know, but it would be nice to know that parents are actually dealing with that kind of stuff in the home. Although I think, we're seeing less and less of that, which is why we see more and more crime out on the streets. Um, so I don't know, what do you think? And I think we touched on this last time we talked, but I mean, what do you think police officers and the public need to do in order to bridge that gap? Like where can each group start?
I think it starts with simple communication. I
Mhm.
mean, I think I told the story last time where you have the younger guy who's uh, the macho cop who wears the sunglasses on his head even at night, and wears the gloves and has the ego when he walks in places, and you'll
Yeah.
go in a gas station and a citizens will go, "Hey, officers, thank you for what you do," and they put their hand out and extend it for a handshake, and I don't shake hands,
Mhm.
and you're like, "Oh, come on, man,
Yeah.
you just turned somebody off. Why do you
Mhm.
do this stuff?" So I think a lot of it goes back to the academy. I'll tell you what, one of the best uh, it was like a 2-hour in-service class is all it was, just a 2-hour touch up. It was probably 10 years ago, maybe longer, 12 years ago, but probably one of the best I had, and I dreaded going to it because they put it out and they were like, "We're gonna have this, what do they call it? A cultural class," but I can't remember how they labeled it. And we were like,
Mhm.
"Oh, man, here we go again, gonna go in here and get told how racist we are and all this
Mhm.
stuff." But I went in there and there were some black instructors in there and they were talking and they started sharing with us. And I grew up around a bunch of black people.
Mhm.
I grew up, our church was very multicultural. I had black friends. But when I went on runs on the street, it was different because these are people that were, friends and played with
Yeah.
and went to school with and all that. But when you show up on a run, say when we go to the projects and there'd be a shooting and you'd have, 200, 300 people surround you,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden auntie or mama or somebody's just screaming and they seem mad at you.
Right.
And as a human being, you take it personal, like, what did I do? I didn't shoot anybody. Why are you yelling at me? Why are you cussing at me?
Yeah.
And then they came in and they talked about the difference in culture. And we know there's a difference in culture, but if we say it, we get called racist, but we know there's a difference in culture.
Mhm.
And when he explained that those outbursts isn't anger. That's just the way the black females, at least in this era that we were being taught this, were expressing their grief and their emotion. And that enabled me to, on these scenes from there on out, to be able to see that in a totally different light and be able to help those people as opposed to now there being a new problem on scene.
Yeah.
And so I was able to pass that down to other guys going, "Hey, ho, 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 back off. Let them vent. Let them say what they say. It's not toward you.
Yeah.
Their loved one just got shot.
Right.
This is a reaction." So they went through and they told us different things about the ethnicity and the cultural difference. And that was huge. And that's the only time in my career I've had that. Didn't have it in the academy. We talked about different race and things, but nothing that specific and that open and honest. And I think that's the problem. We're so scared now of offending anybody that we can't talk.
Yeah.
Like, people will critique what I just said to you about
Mhm.
being cultural differences. And I'm okay with that. I don't care. I don't work for a department now. They can't fire me. If nobody wants to buy my book, don't buy the book. I don't care. The point here is if we can teach these guys on an adult level how to deal with people, with citizens, older people versus younger people, black people versus white. There is a difference on how you handle people. If
Yeah.
I'm in a one end of town and switch to the other, there's a difference in culture. So I've got to adjust my policing to that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't do that. We put the RoboCop helmet on and we go full bore, and there's no discrepancy. I've seen a lot of younger officers lose the ability to use discernment.
Yeah.
We've got discernment in some of these laws. You don't have to lock everybody up for everything or cite them for everything.
Right.
You can actually help somebody and change their life by the way you treat them on this run and give them a break. We all need it, right?
Yeah.
So why not extend that to the people you're out there trying to help? And I think that's a big step going forward that we can take. Now, as far as the public, man, we're not raising these kids in their house, so that's a tough one.
Yeah.
They're going to have some mentors in their communities, be straight with them and be honest with them that they'll listen to, because they're not going to listen to us. If I come to them
Right.
with solutions, they don't want to hear it. So
Yeah.
I don't really have the answer to that. I'd say the churches are a big step, but the families are just going to have to do better.
I did Anthony McNeil's off-duty podcast yesterday. We did another episode, and we were talking about that teen fight in the New Jersey Mall that happened a few days ago. The one that, the black kid and the white kid, they get into a fight, and the black kid gets handcuffed, the white kid doesn't. Well, you got people like Ben Crump who, enter stage left, because it's a high profile case. There's a payday in it for him. But people like Ben Crump, if we're talking about what the public can do to bridge the gap, if Ben Crump would enter a situation like this, and instead of telling this, I think he was 14, 15-year-old kid, this black kid, instead of saying, yeah, these cops are racist, they're always going to be racist. Anytime you run into a white cop, they're going to think you're the bad guy. They're going to think you're the suspect. You're always going to get handcuffed. You're always going to be a victim of theirs. And he's going to carry that into his adult life because nobody else is going to tell him any different. But if you had people like Ben Crump, who have a tremendous amount of influence when it comes to a case like this, if he could facilitate a discussion between the cops that arrested the kid, and the kid's parents, to give those cops a chance to explain why it wasn't racially motivated. Because I don't know if you saw the video or not, but I mean, Anthony and I discussed it. He doesn't think it was racially motivated, and I don't either. But we'll never get a chance to hear from the officers, at least not for several weeks or even months, because now there's an investigation and attorneys are involved. But instead of showing up on scene with a can of gas and throwing it on the fire of already high racial tensions, why not try to facilitate some sort of communication between the cops and the kid and the family, so that this kid doesn't grow up thinking that all police officers are bastards, and they're all racist, and anytime he deals with one, they're going to shoot first, cuff first, tackle first, and then ask questions later.
Right. I mean, what do we have? 800,000 interactions a day with citizens, and a handful of them a year go south. Cops are wrong in some of them, they're right in some of them, but you don't hear about the thousands of great interactions a day where people are saved, people are helped. And unfortunately, that goes back to what we were saying earlier, where I used to think, man, we need professional PR firms, to help these departments through some of these things. Now I thought, no, just tell the truth. We don't need a PR firm. Just tell the truth. Don't spin anything. Just tell it like it is. And if these cops were wrong there in that, we'll figure it out. But again, the tape stopped rolling there, so we don't even know what happened after that. Did the white kid get cuffed? I don't know. But one mistake you made about Ben Crump is he's not about the black community. He's about the green community, which is money, and that's all he wants. And he'll come in, he'll stir things up. And if he does what you said, his payday's not as big. But if I can come up and rally the crowd and stir things up, these city leaders go, oh, how much do you want? Just get out of our city. And he'll gladly take it and disappear and never come back and help that family again. That's not what he's about. And so we need real people that have influence to do it. And if he would change his course, if he would change the way he does things, I wouldn't care if he got paid on bad situations. It'd be great, fine, whatever. Do your job. That's it. But don't divide the community while you're doing it, because all he's doing is setting up his next payday. If I infuriate the crowd, they're going to react to the cops are going to react to them, and I get another payday out of it. So he knows what he's doing. He's got a cycle going here himself.
Oh, for sure.
It's a racket.
For sure. Do you think, this might be pretty cynical of me, but do you think for someone to rise up to the position that Ben Crump is in, or let's say, any elected position, whether it's, mayor, governor, attorney general, whatever the case is, do you think it's possible for people to ignore the opportunity to get that payday and instead focus on the greater good and try and bridge that gap? Because again, it's those people with influence that need to do it. Like you said, you and I can't. I mean, we can write books and we can do podcasts, and we can probably make a difference with a few people. But as far as an entire community, after a critical incident like the Breonna Taylor one, for example, I think it's incumbent upon governors, mayors, city council leaders. But I mean, like you said, Ben Crump, he sees an opportunity to get paid, doesn't care about the black community. But do you think it's possible for people not to be corrupted by that opportunity for a big payday and instead focus on what needs to happen?
I think there's a few. I don't think there's many because I
Yeah.
think, money corrupts so much.
Hmm.
Even stuff that starts out good and good intentions and morally upright. If too much money gets involved, there always seems to be some type of corruption that starts happening with it. And
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I'm an optimist.
Hmm.
If we weren't optimists, we wouldn't be cops. I know we get jaded from the job, but at the same time, it's a weird kind of Jekyll and Hyde thing where we don't trust people, we're jaded, but at the same time, we keep doing what we're doing because we think there could be light at the end of the tunnel, and we hope there's light at the end of the tunnel. And so I don't know. I think there's some good people that could do it. And you wonder, like somebody like LeBron James, how much money is enough, man? You got
Right.
$1 billion. Do you
Hmm.
need to capitalize on that anymore, or can you start actually investing into changing things as opposed to stirring the pot? That would be awesome.
Yeah. And LeBron James is one of those people who, despite all of his grievances and lamenting about the racial disparity between white and black people, or the white community and the black community, has clearly shown that it's absolutely possible to rise up and be a success and be a person of
Right.
tremendous influence as a person of color. And instead of using that influence and using his tremendous resources, like you said, he's worth $1 billion. Why not go into the black community and go, you know what? I get why you guys feel this way. Why you believe that there's this racial divide, but nobody is the only person standing in your way is you and your own mindset. They're
Mhm.
white people aren't blocking the entrance. Okay. LeBron James could do that, and he could have a very positive effect on thousands of young people in these
Oh
black
yeah.
communities. But
Right.
instead, he chooses to take to Twitter to attack the police every time there's a justified use of force.
Well, hopefully Kyle Rittenhouse will at least check him a little bit here. We'll see.
I hope so too. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Um, so were you ever involved in any other critical incidents, the shootings or anything like that before Breonna Taylor?
In 2010, we were doing a search warrant, and we had gone to one point of entry. The guy who was in charge at that point didn't like it. We moved to another one. I really liked the second one because we could see right through and we could see our threats. Um, and for whatever reason, he didn't like it, so we went back to the original, which we've never done. But he had more experience in this area than I did at the time. I go up and I go to open the screen door, and I usually you can pop the handle and the door will come
Hmm.
off, come open because it wasn't a real heavy door. I
Yeah.
grab the handle, I yank it, I end up with the handle in my hand. I throw it down. As soon as I pull my gun out of my holster, a shot comes through the door.
Whew.
Um, and it goes by my head. The glass cuts me. And so that was a close call. I've been in one where I was next to a guy that had to shoot somebody. And then a few other, shot at while we're in the projects and stuff like that. Several incidents where I had the justification to shoot people,
Hmm.
but the experience along the way helped me realize that wasn't the force necessary at that point. While legally I'd have been justified, morally, I don't know. It was right there on the line that, unfortunately, they didn't shoot me and I didn't have to shoot them.
Well, thank God.
Yeah,
Um, well, and that's an example of how police officers don't just shoot first and ask questions later. Even if you had
right.
the justification and the opportunity to use deadly force, you decided not to. And that takes an incredible amount of restraint in a high stress situation like that,
Yeah,
because normally, at least the way, as far as you're trained, it's like deadly threat, gun comes up, send rounds down range, eliminate the
right.
threat. But obviously, you took the time to process the situation and decided that deadly force wasn't necessary, which
Right.
bravo. That's
Yeah,
that's
it's
not an easy thing to do. At least the way
and
I'm playing it out in my mind, that would be incredibly difficult.
and you do look back and second guess yourself. I mean, at that moment, I felt secure in what I was doing. I felt in
Hmm.
control. So I know I did the right thing, but then there's times where you're sitting there going, man, what if he had decided to just boom real quick? Where would I be? Would I
Yeah.
be back? Would I have been in this situation sooner in my career? Or would that have come back to haunt me now? Or, there's a lot of things that sorry about that, that your mind goes through that scenarios just play out over and over and over.
Yeah. One of the biggest complaints that I seem to be fielding from members of the public, like, whether they're a follower, or critic, or whatever, is that police officers don't get enough training as far as the mental health aspect of things. People we deal with. What's your response to that? I know what mine is, and we're probably on the same page, but what's your response to people who think that police officers need to have a clinical psychology degree in order to go out and deal with these people who are in a mental health crisis?
Oh, you're talking about with them. I thought you meant police weren't getting enough mental health,
Oh, well,
which
we know for sure that police aren't
I know
getting
we're
enough.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that in a
No,
minute, but I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
dealing with mentally unstable people is tough.
Yeah.
Years ago, we started in our department a program that's a 2 week long. It sends people through. It teaches them. They go to the hospital where these people are housed. They talk to clinicians and professionals, and how to talk people down and stuff. And that's all great and dandy on paper, but when you get in real life, if somebody don't want to be talked down, if they're checked out up here, there's
Hmm.
nothing you can do.
Yeah.
And a lot of them do not feel pain. If you try to use pain compliance to control them, they just don't. They've
Yep.
got that shut off in their head. So, when those people are that hell bent on doing something, usually it's a tragic situation. And it's sad because in their right mind, or had they been on their meds, that wouldn't have taken place.
Hmm.
So I don't think the answer is sending social workers in because they're going to get killed.
Hmm.
Um, but as far as the police, I think you can train us as much as you can. But at the end of the day, it's our job to protect the community and ourselves. We've got
Right.
a responsibility to ourselves. And unfortunately, there's a part of the community that think we don't. They want us to get shot first and then respond, or they
Hmm.
want us to get killed and then take them into custody nicely, or whatever the case may be. But even in my case now, I was shot first and then returned fire, and you're still the villain. So, at some point, you just got to ignore those idiots, and
Hmm.
you've got to do your job. And it's not the mental health care issue is not an easy one, and unfortunately, a lot of these issues and these problems fall back on the police to solve. When it's not the police's issue, it could have been helped when these kids were in school. They could have been um, programs there that caught these red flags that said, "Man, this person needs help now,"
Yeah.
and start early. And there's enough government programs out there for it, but we wait till they're adults and they're living on the street or they're in a crisis mode, and then they send us in, and it's just not good.
Yeah.
I don't know the
I
answer, but it's not good.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree, and there's no easy way, and almost no correct way to deal with a person who's in a mental health crisis every
Yeah,
single time, right? There's no template
yeah,
for how to do that, and I think what people don't understand is that when the police show up, like it's gotten to the point where it's dangerous now. He's combative, he's violent, maybe he has weapons, but like you said, they don't feel pain a lot of the times. um, they're being violent towards a family member, or they're running down the road naked and just doing all kinds of very unusual antisocial things. But the police are there to restrain and control and transport. That, when they're in a crisis, is not the time to provide therapy.
mm,
Okay, because even if you tried, they're not listening. They're not, it's not going to get through. So I think that's where, a lot of people, especially the ones who have no clue what the reality of police work is they think is if we show up with, and treat them with kid gloves and talk very nicely to them, they'll stop waving the knife around and throwing their own feces at people and calm down and listen. And that doesn't happen. We have to go in and, yeah, we have to force these people um, to, into cuffs, into restraints, into a hospital, where they can receive treatment. Um, and it's a dirty police work is violent sometimes, and I think people want to try to dismiss that notion is that it shouldn't be violent. Well, if you have violent people in the world, police officers need to also be violent sometimes. That
yeah.
doesn't mean they're out of control.
We don't live in Mayberry. I mean, there's
No.
no just going up. Hey, Ollie, here's what we're doing, buddy. Come on, let's go to jail. You know where the
Hmm.
keys are. That's fairyland. It doesn't take place. And if our city leaders, if you're mayors, if you're councilmen, if you're Ben Crumps of the world, would just jump in a patrol car for a couple of weeks and go ride late watch in the worst ends of the city, they'd get a little bit of taste of it. Or if
Yeah.
your biggest critics, hey, come on down, hop in, let's go for a ride. How would you have handled that? After they see something go down, ask them, how would you handle it?
Hmm.
And most of the time, they're going to be like, I probably would have shot him. Well,
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah. Well,
That's not the answer to everything.
yeah. So now you're on
But
the other side of the spectrum,
yeah, yeah,
because they're scared at that point because they see the reality. They're like, oh my god, that guy was scary. He was
right.
violent. He was coming after us. And they're like, we should have just shot him. Well, no, you don't just shoot him. You go, I mean, if you need to, obviously, yeah.
Right.
But there are times when police officers have to get dirty with people. Now, not in a excessive force kind of way, but sometimes you
Right.
got to take people to the ground and roll around with them for a minute until you get them under control, and either get them to jail or get them to, some sort of mental health institution where they can
Right.
get help. But um speaking on the issue of trust from the public, the public trusting. Well, actually, let's go back real quick before I forget. The mental health aspect for police officers.
Hmm.
Um, I agree with you. I don't think there are enough resources. I don't think the resources that we currently have are accessible enough, at least in my area. I know it's different, for different agencies. But the best thing that I ever did for myself was get counseling after after having investigated and been involved in, tons of critical incidents and investigating, like, child sex cases that get very dark and very, just these heinous crimes, that stuff can all pile up and culminate into a mental health crisis.
All
And
right.
the best thing I ever did was get help for that, was go to counseling. So, but I know that there's a stigma attached to that, with a lot of police
There
officers
is.
think, well, once I do that, once I take that step, then I'm marked. I'm no longer an asset, you know.
And then they wait till it's too late. So there's a guy right now on my old department who just got fired. Um, he was a homicide detective, and he had been an Iraqi war veteran, been in combat over there, came here, and evidently during the riots last year, with all the gunfire, the threats, the just all the chaos that went on. Because in Louisville in 2020, it lasted over a year. Every
Mhm.
single day, those guys were down there, and and that's a long time to be having that huge stress of 12, 14-hour days, off days canceled, vacations canceled. I mean, those guys were under tremendous mental stress. And
Yeah.
for somebody that's got some PTSD and hadn't dealt with it, that flared some things up evidently in his head. At least that's his defense's case right now.
Yeah.
And and he actually had a hit list out on some of the officers he worked with
Oh.
because of whatever reason. I don't know all the specifics behind it, but once that was found out, he went away to treatment, and then they fired him. But now it's too late. His career's over. His
Yeah.
reputation's ruined. If somebody had seen that back in 2020 when he's going through these riots and go, "Hey, dude, just take a break here. You go away for a couple of days. Go get help.
Mhm.
Let us set you up with somebody." But I don't know how you guys had it, but we had what's called the EAP program. It's
Mhm.
an early intervention type thing,
Yep.
and
That's
you
what I
had to
used.
call, and then you had to get a number, and then you had to find and the problem with a lot of counselors is they're not pro police.
Yeah.
Because I started seeing one after our incident, and we wanted to get our youngest into one, and he was like, let me find, because I'm on this group on Facebook, and 90% of them hate the police, and I don't want your kid going to one that already hates the police,
Mhm.
because they won't do him any good.
Wow.
And it's sad that in a industry that's supposed to be neutral, like the police are supposed to be neutral,
Mhm.
you've got to wade through it. Because what would it be like if one of these psychiatrists or psychologists called us for a run, and the dispatcher had to go, "Wait a minute, are you black or white? You're black. Oh, I can't send any officers your way. We only got 10% that like black people."
Yeah.
That
Right.
wouldn't go over. That
No.
wouldn't work. But in that field, it works.
Mhm.
And it was kind of the same issue we had when getting our criminal lawyers for the case. None of us could get anybody in Louisville. Nobody wanted to touch us because they didn't want their their reputations damaged because their clientele are a bunch of thugs,
Mhm.
and B, they didn't want to get assaulted. They didn't want to get called out. They didn't want their family put in danger.
Wow.
So we got them from different states and all. I mean, I've got a civil attorney. It's just crazy the amount of fear that's pushed and the amount of bias that's pushed against the police in these certain fields.
Yeah.
So the mental health issue, yes, it is a ego check for cops. You got to do
Mhm.
it.
Yep.
But then it's got to be easy for you too. You can't have to jump through all these hoops, or we just won't do it. We've
Yeah.
got way too much stuff going on, and I think that's where the departments fail people. Do you know Randy Sutton,
That name
lieutenant,
sounds
retired?
yeah.
He runs Wounded Blue.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
a
Yeah,
or
yeah.
it's an organization that helps guys who've been through issues like mine, where like the departments and the cities turn their back on people.
Okay.
And I went to a conference of his first one last year in Vegas, and the it's challenging, right? There's a lot of things that went on that's tough. But man, I heard some of their stories and how their departments really bailed on them. I mean,
Mhm.
some of them didn't get their pay while they were off. I mean, one guy got shot in the head with an AR by a guy that they were chasing. It's all on video. Shot in the head, rolled his car when he went off the road. The workman's comp fought him for over 2 years on paying his bills. He lost his house, lost his car. The department didn't pay him because workman's comp was supposed to pay him. So nobody was
Jeez.
helping this guy. Him
Wow.
and his family went bankrupt, and there's been no justification for that stuff. I think after 2 years, workman's comp finally paid the medical bills, but he
Mhm.
never got the back pay. I mean, and so Randy's really reached out through this organization to help with uh, response to incidents, as far as coming for the mental health part of it and saying, hey, how can we help? Let us help you here. And then guiding them through some of the processes, which is what we need. We need more. If we had that in every state, a chapter like that in every state, it
Mhm.
would be a good starting point. It wouldn't be the end all, but it'd be a good starting point.
Yeah. I one of my goals before my life took a complete, 180 after the LeBron James TikTok is I wanted to go back to school and I wanted to get a degree so that I could provide therapy for first responders because after my situation and my experience, we had EAP as well, but like you said, you call a number, which I did. I called this number and I'm pretty sure like an 18-year-old kid answered the phone and I think he was taking a nap and I woke him up and he was less than interested in helping me out. And he answered the phone. He's like, "Hello," and I'm like, "I was trying to call the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program," and he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay," and I told him my situation. I'm like, "I'm looking for a counselor," and he's like, "Yeah, just find one in your area that takes EAP, and they'll take care of it." And I was like, "This is the most humiliating thing I've ever been through." But I stuck with it and ended up finding a counselor. And like I said, it was the best decision I ever made because it helped
Right.
tremendously. But any other officer who has to go jump through that many hoops just to get they're going to quit. They're going to be like,
I wouldn't do
fuck it.
it. I
Yeah, I'll
wouldn't
go
do
home
it.
and drink. I'll go home and
Yeah.
drink and I'll pop pills and that'll be a lot easier. So my goal is what I wanted to do, like a lot of these bigger departments, they have people like psychologists and therapists and people like that on staff, um, to treat their guys. But a lot of mid-sized to smaller agencies, they don't have that. But it would be awesome if those agencies that don't have a full-time therapist employed to contract with somebody. So when there's a critical incident, that person can show up and talk to the officers and say, listen, we don't have to talk right now. If you want to, we can, but let's set up an appointment for like next week and you
Right.
come in and you talk to me. It's all confidential. Your chief doesn't get to know what you said. Your captains don't get. Nobody knows. It's all confidential. So it's for the cops. It's not for any sort of fit for duty evaluation or anything like that. Nobody is privy to the discussion except for the therapist and the officer. So it would be, I envision that as something that needs to happen with these agencies that don't have those type of resources.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Um, Well, let's see. What are you up to now? I mean, you've written the book. What's on your plate these days?
I've been traveling around speaking. Able to tell the story, try to help others, share some things. So one of the things we're doing too is we're putting together a handbook with some other people who've been through critical incidents,
Hmm.
because when we went through it, there was no guidebook. It was like, well, good luck. And I heard from
Yeah.
the department like the first 2 days I'd been shot. After that, it was like they distanced themselves, and I had no point of contact, nobody that I could go to and go, what's going on here with this investigation? Can somebody call for me? Fortunately, I had enough contacts of my own I could reach out to people. But if I'd only had 2 or 3 years on, man, I'd have been sunk, not
Yeah.
knowing where to turn. And so we're putting together a handbook that's kind of like a quick reference guide. So when you're through it, man, go through and start checking this stuff off. And
Okay.
beforehand, here's who your emergency contacts are. I know the department has it, but we don't always keep that stuff up to date.
Yeah.
Or like in our instance, we were in the middle of moving and we were trying to buy another house. We are sold quick, so we moved in the basement of a friend of ours. So none of that got transferred over in the system. My fault, but it didn't get transferred over in the system because we're getting ready to move in this other house, so I don't need to.
Yeah.
It's just real quick. And so nobody knew where to get my wife that night. So
Uh,
luckily, my other friends started reaching out to some of our personal friends we had that aren't on the police department, and they were able to locate her. But it was a hassle and it was a problem. And so, stuff like, some husbands do all the banking and the wives don't know anything about it. All right, well, here's all the passwords. Here's what we pay. Here's,
Mm.
all this stuff that you don't think about. Who's going to take care? Who's going to come get my kid if there's a critical incident? If the
Yeah.
police show up at my house 2 in the morning and want to whisk me to the hospital, what am I going to do with my 2-year-old?
Right.
Okay, well, I've got that in place. Aunt so and so, come watch the kid. We've already got this prearranged. So all these things that you just don't think about ahead of time. We prepare for vacations. We prepare in the academy on how to fight. We prepare how to shoot, but we don't prepare anything for what to do after you're involved in a critical incident. And I
Yeah.
think that's sad. I think that's something that, why keep recreating the wheel? People
Hmm.
know how to do it. People have been through it, but we're not sharing that information.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's going to be a really useful tool. Um, and you're in the process of putting that
yeah,
together. It's not
yeah.
available yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
We're going to present it next week. I go to our FOP and I'm going to present it to our board and see if they'll take it to the national FOP so they can kind of trickle down, because it'd be almost impossible for me to go to every department. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Right.
But if the national FOP is pushing it downstream to all the FOPs, then they could have those resources handy, with the click of a mouse on a computer. They don't have to be printed books. You can get in there and download it yourself and print it out, and plus it's free that way.
Yeah. Cool.
So
Well,
that's
that's
the deal.
awesome, man. Where can people find you? Other than on Amazon and order your book, are you on social media? What are your handles?
Yeah, on all the platforms, no matter which one. It's at Sergeant Mattingly, at SGT Mattingly, Mattingly.
Cool.
No matter which one you go to, that's it.
Okay. And I'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can just click and follow.
All right.
So, well, brother, I appreciate you joining me today. That was a good talk. Very eye opening. And I'm looking forward to reading your book.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, mate.